Hi, everybody. I have just finished this book. It's called Dear Jennifer by Rebecca Redshaw. And I must say, I started it thinking, oh, it's a sweet little ditty about a child, starts when she's in the first grade, and you read on and on about life. And it's really an incredible story. You're going to meet the author, Rebecca Redshaw, who has been a part of the entertainment industry for, well, she was for 25 years before she retired to write. And she's written novels and plays, and you're just going to love meeting Rebecca Redshaw. Rebecca, you were here for a film festival years ago, and you spoke about preservation of film, which was something that you did at the last career before you became a writer.
Right. I spent several years at Sony Pictures.
Yeah.
And at the festival, I monitored a panel of film experts in audio and film and different techniques from the studios. It's a fascinating part of the industry. And anytime I said to someone I worked in restoration, it was like, wow, that's so cool, because we all want to see these gems
survive. It was frightening to read years ago how many really marvelous films were actually lost. They just fell apart.
Well, they fell apart because the studios had no idea the life of a film, and they would use the original to make tons of prints. Well, they don't do that anymore. Now they make protections and intermediaries, and so they've gotten smarter about it because it's so profitable. I mean, the DVD world has made films last forever, which is fabulous.
Well, you know, you spent, and we are going to talk about your writing, and we're going to talk about Dear Jennifer. That's why you're here. But the fact that you were in the industry for so long, and you were in music in the very beginning.
I was a music major in college, and I came out to California with a suitcase and a one-way ticket, a suitcase of songs. So that's how I started. I went into the
songs that you wrote?
That I wrote, with lyrics that I wrote. That was my first actual word smithing.
Yeah.
And I worked in the recording studios for a number of years, all the major ones in Hollywood, Wally Heider, United Western, Record Plant, and eventually, you know, rose to a level where I was managing the studios, but wanted to learn more. So I got into film.
Yeah. But you worked with some of the greats.
I had the best time. I would write home and they would go, you know, you're kidding. Because Frank Sinatra recorded part of his trilogy album at United Western, and I was in the sound booth watching him and a full orchestra of musicians when he sang New York, New York. And I remember the look on Sonny Burke's face, his producer, when Frank does that slur that no one else in the world could pull off. And Sonny went like, yes, he knew that take was it. And that was wonderful. And Mr. Sinatra was just, I was a very young girl, and he was just gracious and wonderful. Yeah. And Barry Manilow recorded in the same studio years later. And sort of a funny story then, because there was a gentleman running the studio that Barry gave a bottle of Dom Perignon to, and he gave me 24 Yellow Roses, which was lovely at the end of the album. And I took one rose and we swapped. I took home the champagne, and I'll always thank him for that. It was a wonderful treat. Yeah,
that is so cute.
It was great.
Well, did you always want to be a writer?
You know, I always thought I had something to say. And initially it was through music, because that is a love of mine. But as I grew older, I think I just became more and more involved in putting my thoughts into prose. And so I don't know that I always wanted to be a writer, but I probably always was meant to be a writer.
Yeah. Well, now, when did you start Dear Jennifer?
Well, now that's an interesting story too, because this is one of my first stops on a tour.
A tour of life?
Well put. That's absolutely. It is a tour of life, because I'm meeting people from all aspects of the world here. But I wrote Dear Jennifer 20 years ago, and I wrote it when I was working in the studio. And I wrote it from 5 a.m. till 7 in the morning, because that was the only time I had. And then I went to the gym, and then I went to the studio, and I'd get home at 10 o'clock at night and think, okay, what are you going to write tomorrow morning? And mentally think that through. And it sort of sat as my writing. I tend to let my writing sit a little too long. Now that I'm getting older, I don't want to do that anymore. But it's
20 years is a long time.
It's a long time.
But the timing is right now.
But that absolutely. 20 years ago, if I had published this, it would have been, oh, it's just another book. And now it really is very timely, and I'm very proud of that. And the reaction that I'm getting from people that have read the book has been 100% marvelous.
Well, the concept, and I certainly don't think we're giving anything away by talking about the concept, and the fact that you start out with, as I think I said in the beginning, the first grade of school. And Craig Prater, who's a friend of yours and a friend of mine, told me about you, told me about the book, and suggested that I might like to talk to you. So I said, well, let me read the book.
Of course.
And I opened this book, and it says, Dear Jennifer, and it starts with the first day of school, you know. The mom is wishing, or grandmother's wishing her luck. And I thought, oh, isn't this sweet? It must be a biography, an autobiography. And I thought, as I went along, isn't it interesting that this, and I thought I'll read it for 10 minutes. Isn't it interesting that this holds me as she gets a little bit older and as her life progresses and those of whom she's friendly and her friends? Well, I found, of course, that I could not put down the book.
Great.
And I read it in one sitting, and it deals with a lot of things that are, I guess, have always been an important part of our world, but people were not quite as aware of it, the public, as they are now.
Right.
And it brings it out so beautifully. Her friend Michael, who goes all the way through the book until the end. It just, and I don't want to give it all away, and yet
it's so much part of it. It really
you
is.
giggle and you laugh, and then at the end or near the end, and you really find out what's happening, you have a little tear.
Well, good.
And
I hope so.
A little something here.
I think that the thing that's important about Dear Jennifer is that you really care about the people.
Yes.
You care about the characters, and you get to know them very well. And these are letters.
Well, I figured they were real letters. I mean, this was
Yeah.
to me amazing. And then after I read it, I still thought, well, this must be based on your life to a degree, and it really isn't.
No, I'm a writer, and a fiction writer primarily, although I do some journalistic work.
Yeah.
And I'm flattered when people think this is my life. First of all, I don't know that I'm as nice as Jennifer is, but you know, you can debate that after you read the book and then know me better. But it was a labor of love, because it is as if you find a stack of letters, and letters are a lost art. Everybody emails, but you know, no one reads emails twice, really.
That's true.
And cell phones weren't around in 1960 and 84 even, and so it's a slice of life in a time of family and friendship. I think that is we all would like.
Well, every one of the characters in here is so well defined. You know them through these letters, and it's letters not only to Jennifer and from Jennifer.
No, not from Jennifer. There's not.
There isn't one? Oh.
See that, but don't hesitate on that one, because that's actually complimentary, because you feel you know Jennifer.
Oh, yes.
But everything you know about Jennifer is what other people have written to her. There is not. That's the difference between this novel and every other letter or epistolary novel ever written, as far as I know. I'm sure there's some out there, and someone will call and tell you. But these are all written to Jennifer. So you know her by what other people think of her, and the reality is, that's life.
Yeah.
You know,
that's right.
When you're gone, when we're gone, and we go to the service where everybody stands up and says, "Wasn't she a great gal?" or "Wasn't he a great guy?" It's what everybody else thought, and that's what comes out with this.
Yeah.
So
well, okay. So what made you decide to do this book in this way?
You know, it is almost like when I write a play. Someone says, "Why do you write a play as opposed to a novel?" I don't know. It just comes to me in that way, and I wanted to tell this story with as little fluff and dressing as possible. There's also no descriptions in this book of physical characteristics, although people know what these people look like.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it has been dramatized. So it's been done as a 1 and a 2 act. Yeah. So obviously it gets cast. So
I can see that it would be a marvelous 1 or 2 act play. We are going to return to you in just a second, but first, these messages. Dear Jennifer, we've been talking about the book Dear Jennifer and speaking to Rebecca Redshaw, who is the author, and the concept of this wonderful book of letters to Jennifer, which actually spell out a life. And one of the main characters is Michael. We meet him through a letter when he's in the 1st grade with her.
Right.
And as he gets older, his life becomes a little more complicated.
Yeah, excuse me.
Yeah, and he's from the wrong side of the tracks as far as her family is concerned, but he's her consistent friend, and as his life changes, that friendship means so much to him. There is a chapter or a letter, and I wonder if you would read it, since I don't have my glasses.
I'd be happy to.
And I'd love to have
I just happen to have my glasses.
This is a letter from Michael to his longtime friend ever since the 1st grade. And how old is he here?
He would be a senior, and he's leaving school, and he's just had it. He wants to be a dancer, and he wanted to try to stick it out, but this letter's written in 1972. I tried, Jen. I tried to stick it out until graduation, but I just can't tolerate this place anymore. It's not only school or the kids or my father, it's everything. Ever since my dad found Robert's letters and beat me up, that will make me a man now, won't it? Life is unbearable at home. And what do I have at school? Some stupid classes that mean nothing to a dancer? I'm writing on this legal pad because it's the only paper I could find. Hitching to California may be my smartest move ever. At least in San Francisco, I won't be the only freak. I need to be loved again. I need to hear the applause from the darkness, to taste the sweat under the lights, to feel the music. God, Jennifer, I need to make love to someone who knows my name. I don't want to go through the motions anymore. I don't want to pretend. I will miss you terribly. I already do. Of everyone in my life, you're the only one I've loved who hasn't hurt me. Good luck at school. I know you'll be great, Michael.
Was there anyone in your life that you knew that resembles Michael? Because he's outrageous in the beginning in certain segments, and yet here it touches your heart.
Yeah, not anyone I can pinpoint that I would pattern him after, but I certainly have grown to love Michael. I loved him when I was writing him. He's such a fun man.
Yeah.
And he was sort of an effervescent spirit. He just kept going and going, and balanced out with Jennifer, who seems so much more reserved than him. And so it was a nice friendship, and it was sort of a mix of many people I've probably known.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And of course, later on, he gets AIDS.
Yes. Remember the time frame of this is 1960 when they're in first grade until 1984.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael was a dancer and moved to San Francisco and lived the dancer's life, and lived life to the fullest, which many people do in their 20s and 30s. Only the ramifications at that time were far more serious, and he does get AIDS. And one of the justifications for letters as opposed to phone calls is that these friends always lived in different cities. And I don't know if it happened in your life, it certainly happened in mine, where I go somewhere and then just when I'm getting there, that person moves to another city. Okay. And so they correspond, and they correspond with candor. And Michael gets AIDS, and Jennifer is there for him, as a friend would be. And this book, when people say, what is it about? Is it about AIDS? Well, a character has AIDS, as if a character would have ALS or kidney disease or any other affliction. But the time of it is right for the AIDS. Mm. This book is about friendship, yeah, and about sacrifice. And if Jennifer had donated a kidney, she would have been a hero. But instead, she decides to marry Michael, or at least offer to marry him. And during that, of course, outs herself with her family and her work, and has a great deal to lose.
And she does this for a specific reason, about the insurance,
yes,
correct?
Michael has no insurance, and at least none that would, he's been going from job to job. Dancers know we don't, writers like dancers, like artists, don't get insurance on a regular basis. If they get enough hours in, they do. So she gives him so he has medical insurance, and takes care of him.
And she has a partner.
Yeah, she does.
And the partner understands, finally.
Tries. It's a tough call. It's a convoluted time, because one set of parents knows, one set of parents doesn't know. It's like life in mm-hmm. families, it's complicated. But it comes out fairly clearly, I think, what the situation is.
Well, I think that when you said that it has been a one-act play and a two-act play, mm-hmm. it would make a spectacular one or two-act play. There's no question in my mind that it would just be wonderful. It's one I would want to see if you bring that here again.
Oh, I would
Did
love
you do
to.
it here ever?
No, it's not been done here, and I think it would be
here.
wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, at the Annenberg Theater or the Camelot.
Wherever you would like. I think it's a fabulous, and it's done as a reading primarily, although it can be staged. So that,
well,
cost
it
is
doesn't really have to be, though.
It doesn't,
because of the letters, the way they did. What was Love Letters?
Oh yeah, and this is very similar in that it's the letter format. We had a reading of SAG actors in Hollywood one time, and Marie Cheatham, who has been a longtime soap star and wonderful actress, read Mother, and just wrenched everybody's heart. And the interesting thing of doing the play reading was that everybody kept turning around and looking at the back of the theater. Well, they were looking for Jennifer. It was so, people get so caught up. And as a novelist, mm-hmm. it's a real kick to have your hear applause, hear total silence because people were grabbing at every word. I love it. I love the idea of the performing, and that's Dear Jennifer was my first novel that was adapted as a play. And since then, I've written a number of other plays, so it's fun.
Were they adapted from novels or short stories?
No,
or?
actually, they started out as plays.
Mm-hmm.
I went there. I wrote one called In Search of Mary Tyler Moore, which is a fun one about aliens that come to Earth. And the only contact with Earth they've had is through the Nick at Night satellite. So everything is sitcoms and Barbara Eden and all these different theme songs they sing. It's really a fun little play. And then I have a new one that's opening up in the Northwest called Four Women. Mm-hmm. And it's a one-woman play.
Does she play four women? Or
one woman plays four women. Mm-hmm. And because the woman I wrote the play for is in her 80s, I had to really be careful how I wrote this play to make it believable so she could stretch and do. But I'm very conscious of women's parts and not having a lot of work available. So I have written a number of things for women my age and older that I think I would love to have actresses jump on, because I think they have wonderful stories to tell.
Do you plan to do any other books with letters? Have you thought about that? You did it so well.
I hadn't until people kept saying, "Are you writing a sequel?" You know.
Well,
and
you could do that, couldn't you?
If the opportunity comes up,
because she's very young.
She's only 30, 31. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If the opportunity arises, it all depends on what this book brings forth and how well it does. I mean,
and the characterizations, in a way, even though they're just through letters, but I mean, for instance, her and her sister, which again starts when she's so young in the first grade and has an older sister, what, 2 years older?
1 year older.
1 year older.
Yeah.
And the difference in their lives, the way that turns out, is
the sister is just married and loves men and has 2 boys and not educational, not smart as far as she thinks she's not smart. And it's amazing. It's the yin and yang of sisterhood. You know, one is everything your parents think they want and then turns out not to be. And it's family. It's friendships. It's all that.
We will return to you, find out more about your Jennifer and things going on right now that are somehow part of this, that are part of the book, because it brings it out in a way after this message. All right, we're always talking about Dear Jennifer because I love the book, so.
Thank you.
And that's why you're here, and you wrote it. And do you think you might do a sequel? Did we talk about that on the air or off the air?
Well, we talked about it, and I said it really depends on the response. I'm just starting with this book. It's just on print. So
we mentioned Michael before,
yes.
And Michael is a main character, a great friend of Jennifer's. They meet in the first grade, and that friendship remains, whether they're near or far from one another. They're great friends and great pals. And he really confides in her, the good and the bad. And there's another kind of cute letter when he's, I guess, appearing in a show. Something happens.
Oh, yes. You know, it's a dancer's life is a precarious one. And this was December 27th, 1975. Dear Jen, my Christmas star faded as fast as a cheap pair of jeans. During the matinee performance, I twisted my knee and had to be placed in the second act. It didn't strike me that a popping sound like that could be serious, but for the last 2 days, I've been lying on my ass with my feet in the air and using ice to help lessen the swelling. Do you know how hard it is to find an orthopedic surgeon Christmas week? I swear they all go to the local ski resorts with their cash registers and wait at the bottom of the slopes. Christopher, my latest amour, brings me dinner on a tray. That's wonderful once, but I can't tolerate the waiting much longer. I tell myself that the dancer's nightmare of surgery will not be in my cards. This is a joke from God to test my spirit, but it's not funny. Anyway, you win. I opted to write a letter rather than watch another soap opera. I'm glad to hear you're planning a graduation trip, sort of a reward for a job well done. How do you feel about pushing a wheelchair around China? Breaking the action, a doctor just called and I have an appointment tomorrow at 2. I'll call you when I know more. Pray to the higher powers, my sweet. I need all the help I can get. Michael.
We see him go through so many things, and we see all of the people in Jennifer's life go through many things. Her mother and her grandmother is certainly an important part, a very understanding part of her life. And you said, I asked if it was based on anyone, you said no. You said, well, maybe my grandmother.
It was. My grandmother was 93 when she died, and I adored the woman. And as my father used to say, yeah, but she was my mother-in-law, so it wasn't always the same. But I really do fictionalize most everybody, but I have threads of my grandmother that are woven through this. And this woman's from New England and very reserved, very proper, which her son married a woman that she didn't think was so proper, which is Jennifer's mother. And the girls, both Gail, the sister, and Jennifer, have a wonderful relationship with her. And it weaves through her stability with the girls.
Earlier in this show, we mentioned the fact that Michael does eventually die of AIDS.
Yes.
And we were talking off camera, and AIDS is sort of making a comeback, which, in a sense, I mean, it hasn't been beaten, and more people are coming down with AIDS or being more promiscuous.
Well, I can't be, I'm not an authority on AIDS, but what I've learned from different panels, Dear Jennifer's been used as a fundraiser for different organizations. And what boards of health in different communities are saying is that attention must be paid. That it's not, people think it's a curable disease, so it's not to worry, and yet one has to always protect oneself. And it's been 25 years, and I think that it's very important for people of all ages to take sexually transmitted diseases very seriously and protect themselves, especially with the people they love.
I asked you, you know, is it the young people? I figured they're the ones that are going to be promiscuous. You expect that, but it's not.
Well, it's the young people plus a whole new population that really shocked me when it came up, and it was again from a health professional who's saying that with the advent of Viagra, that the adult elder community is very much at risk with the population and growing with AIDS. So I think people need to pay attention. I really do.
Of course.
So.
Well, if you want to understand certain things in life that may not be part of your life, I am a heterosexual. I have, you know, surrounded by people I love who are not. And this book really makes you think. And as I said to you, it's in great taste.
Thank you.
So I think that all of you would enjoy, and whether this subject was in it or not, you will enjoy this book, Dear Jennifer, by Rebecca Redshaw, and I hope to see you again here when you do another play.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful.
I thank you, and I hope that you'll be back with us next time right here for Conversations with Gloria Greer on Time Warner Cable TV 10.